But first tonight, our top story. India has put up a united front in its mission to save Kulbhushan Jadhav, the Indian national who was sentenced to death by the Pakistani army court. Speaking in Parliament today, the External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj said Pakistan should think of the consequences of its decision to hang Jadhav. She said India will go out of its way to secure his release. Meanwhile, protests broke outside the Pakistan High Commission in Delhi.
Pakistan's big provocation. Meanwhile, protests erupt outside Pakistan High Commission in Delhi. Angry protesters demand immediate action to bring Jadhav back.
Jadhav Poonawalla along with his supporters protesting here, and now finally these protesters are being detained. All the protesters are being taken away from Pakistan High Commission to the local police station.
But Pakistan is unrelenting, playing dumb on its spy sham while underlaying a veiled threat.
Pakistan armed forces are fully capable and prepared to respond to any spectrum of threat.
As politics brews in the national capital, Jadhav's family has been forced to go into hiding.
The entire family, Kulbhushan's father, mother, wife, one daughter and one son is staying in this particular building on the 5th floor. 502 is a flat number and B wing. But today, the family is missing. The family has gone to unknown location just to stay away from media and press glare.
As Pakistan begins a dangerous spy abduction game, daring India again and again, Jadhav's death penalty becomes a crucial reminder of Sarabjit Singh, a Pakistan-sponsored murder that India has not forgiven.
Saving Kulbhushan Jadhav, what really are India's realistic options today? One is an appeal in a military appellate tribunal. Very little chance, we can tell you, of that actually happening. The other is an appeal in the Pakistani Supreme Court, where there is a greater hope for a fair trial. Petition the Pakistani president for mercy, but remember, the Pakistan president will toe the army line. Move the International Court of Justice, as several other nations have done in the past in such situations. Diplomacy, negotiate with the Nawaz Sharif government, but here the army role will be vital. Take a tough stand on Pakistani prisoners in India. This could mount pressure on Pakistan. Covert operations that build leverage over Pakistan could lend muscle to any talks that are had with Islamabad. The big questions then, should India seriously consider snapping diplomatic ties with Pakistan over Kulbhushan Jadhav? Should India toughen its stand on Pakistani citizens that we hold here in jails? Should India raise Jadhav's sentencing in global fora? Why did Pakistan hurry Jadhav's trial? Was Nawaz Sharif's government kept in the loop by the army? What is Pakistan's game plan in raising tensions once again? Let's turn to my talking point. And joining me now is Shashi Tharoor, the former Minister of State for External Affairs and Congress MP at the moment, joins me. Also joining me is Admiral Javed Iqbal from Pakistan. He's been a diplomat as well. And also joining me is Sambit Patra of the Bharatiya Janata Party. I want to come to you, Shashi Tharoor, first. I'm looking closely at India's options. The country is united at the moment, wanting Kulbhushan Jadhav to be returned. But do you see a serious diplomatic option available, given that we now have the Pakistanis calling him a terrorist on the basis of what they claim is a confessional statement?
Well, first of all, I think the Pakistani behavior on this has been absolutely outrageous, because you do not abduct a citizen of one country from a second country, try him in a third in a military court without any defense lawyer, without any consular access, which is his sovereign right under the Vienna Conventions, and then announce a sentence of execution without any charges having been presented. Apparently, as you say, on the basis of some sort of forced confession that he was involved in espionage, but they have not been able to point to a single crime he's committed, any explosions he's set off, any people he's killed. What do you hang a man for? To prove a political point? To my mind, this is absolutely a rogue state behavior by a nation that is rapidly putting itself in the outlaw category. And I'm shocked that such a kind of thing can happen in the supposedly civilized era of the 21st century. You ask about options. Well, let me say two things. First, we should send a very strong, unambiguous bilateral signal, ideally in private and ideally at the highest levels, making it clear that if they go through with their threat to murder this man, the consequences will be extremely severe and beyond the ordinary. Second, we need to go international on this, because the assault by Pakistan is not just on India, it's on every single convention of international law, international behavior, international standards. The fact that they can ride roughshod over the Vienna Conventions is bad enough. If they claim this was a man waging war, that we're not at war with Pakistan, then they are in violation of the Geneva Conventions. They have not granted any access to the individual by anybody. You're looking at behavior which the rest of the world will see puts them at peril, because if one state can with impunity undermine all the standards that tie us all together in civilized international life, then frankly international law will have no meaning, and you will find that all the canons of behavior we even seen during the Cold War will no longer cease to apply. During the Cold War, the Americans and the Russians would exchange each other's spies rather than execute them. I remember an incident in the 1950s when the Chinese, whom the Americans did not recognize at that time, shot down an American plane and had 5 American airmen in their custody. And UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld asked Jawaharlal Nehru to intervene with the Chinese to get these Americans released, even though they're in that plane flying over China and apparently conducting espionage. Civilized states recognize that you don't need to cross certain limits. Pakistan's military apparently has not only got a foreign policy of its own, it writes its own laws.
Those are very strong statements, and I think brilliantly spoken, Mr. Tharoor, because you're coming to the nub of the question, and Admiral Iqbal, you need to answer that. As Mr. Tharoor said, every convention is being set aside here. This is the operation of a rogue state, not a state that wants to belong in the civilized comity of nations. Without a fair trial, you abduct someone in a third country, bring him to your country, first say you don't have enough evidence. I go by what Sartaj Aziz says. Now your envoy to India says he's a terrorist and therefore deserves to be hanged. And you do not put this evidence before the world. This is the behavior of a rogue state, Admiral Iqbal, I'm afraid.
Well, I think this is also the Indian behavior is typical, that has been there for last 70 years. They are mischievous, they do the thing and raise finger.
Please answer the specific question, sir. Please answer the issues which Mr. Tharoor has raised. Mr. Tharoor has raised important issues. Geneva Convention, Vienna Convention. You are throwing all of them aside. Please answer the question.
India should be ashamed that their serving officer has been pushed into Pakistan for terrorism as raw agent. He has confessed to that. Sir. He has been given fair trial. He has been given advocate to defend himself, and fair trial, of course.
You are not answering the questions that Mr. Tharoor has raised.
Court,
the very valid questions that Mr. Tharoor has raised.
Anti-terrorist court has been approved by the parliament. Even Pakistani are being tried there because security of the state is above everything else.
Should you not put this evidence? If you have evidence, put it in the public domain.
There is enough evidence.
Admiral Iqbal, put it in the public domain if you have evidence.
More than enough.
We are living in a civilized world. Every individual has his human rights.
Who are the civilized world? Should we consider that they are the civilized world? Should we take you as civilized? Sir, you are killing people in Kashmir. You are,
sir,
sort of blinding them.
Day in a row
you have not following any convention.
I am asking you a simple question. Where is the evidence? Please put it in the public domain.
Reply. I say that you are doing, it will be tit for tat. If you will send raw agent for terrorism, they will meet the same fate. Even more will meet the same fate.
Mr. Tharoor, you're hearing Mr. Admiral Iqbal. He's refusing to answer the question, the serious issues that you have raised. Instead says that if you send raw agents into Baluchistan, this is how they will be treated. How do you respond to what you're hearing from the Pakistanis, this belligerence that we are seeing?
Well, it seems to be of a piece with what their military is trying to convey to their own civilian government, which was obviously completely unaware until suddenly they were told by the military this is how it's going to be. Let me say very clearly, no fair trial includes a person who is unable to have access to his own country's consular representatives. No fair trial can be conducted without a defense lawyer of the accused choosing. No fair trial involves a so-called confession which was clearly forced and which in broadcast form has been manifestly edited. Even a child can see the cuts that have been made in the gentleman's statement. All of this suggests a travesty, not at all a matter of serious judicial proceeding. Finally, let me stress, if the man is accused of terrorism, can you please tell us what exactly he did? Has he done something like the 2611 terrorists? Ajmal Kasab captured on video shooting up hundreds of people before he was tried in a court, given defense lawyers, kept in jail for 2-3 years before he was hanged. I mean, the fact is, what is this comparison that this gentleman dares to make between the way in which India has conducted itself as a victim of terrorism and the way in which Pakistan, well known around the world as a perpetrator, financier and guide of terrorists, dares to try and hang an innocent man kidnapped from a neighboring country and brought into Pakistan, and then they say that they have given him a fair trial. Trial for what? We still don't know what the charges are.
You know, that's precisely it. Admiral Iqbal, we still don't know the exact charges. Pakistan keep changing the goalposts. Sartaj Aziz went on record to say there is insufficient evidence. Then we are told he's a spy. Now we are told he's a terrorist. Where is the evidence? If you don't have evidence, you cannot hang a person in a closed military court.
Of terror that he's convicted.
Look, you see, the thing is, if a serving naval commander has been pushed into Pakistan as raw agent and he's, you know,
that's your claim.
Terrorism.
So that's your claim. I want you to back the claim with evidence.
And that dossier has been given. He has been given fair trial. He will have right to appeal. So what is wrong with it? How would you treat your, you know, the people whom you are trying without any
So we caught Ajmal Kasab red-handed in an anti-terrorist operation. And we still, as Shashi Tharoor rightly points out, gave him a fair trial. We caught Ajmal Kasab red-handed in a terror operation and gave him a fair trial. That's the difference, sir, between India and Pakistan. That's the difference, sir. I'm sorry to make this, because you're insisting on targeting India in this manner without providing evidence. But Sambit Patra, quick response.
What was he doing?
Sambit Patra, quick response. You're hearing what the Pakistanis are saying. What can we expect, Mr. Patra?
What was he doing in Pakistan?
Okay, what was he doing in Pakistan? I'll get a response to that. I'll get a response to that. But Sambit Patra, respond to what you're hearing.
Was he visiting? Was he visiting his in-laws? What was he doing in Balochistan? He shouldn't have.
Let's have a civil debate.
The thing is that
let's have a civil debate, sir. Please allow others to speak.
Part of raw team.
Okay, sir. I'm just switching off your mic for a moment because I want to hear Sambit Patra. Sambit Patra, the Pakistanis seem determined in a sense to make this a cause celebrate, to almost suggest that India is involved in Balochistan and using Kulbhushan Jadhav as an example of what they claim is Indian activity, terror activity in Balochistan. How will the government respond? What are the options before the union government?
See, as far as the response of the government is concerned, the government has minced no words today on the floor of the parliament. Two tall ministers of the government, the MEA, in fact, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, went to the extent of saying that he's a son of the country, not just the son of the parents. The country will fend for him, and we will go, quote unquote, out of the way to see to it that he is defended in the best possible way. Rajnath Singh, the home minister of the country, also used equally strong words in Hindi, saying, "Jo bhi karna padega, hum karenge." These words are strong messages which have hit Pakistan at the right place. And mind you, I would say that the foreign policy of India has shifted after the Uri attack and the surgical strike from being reactive. That's what I was sufficing it with certain evidences as to how India has changed its foreign policy. From days of being reactive towards Pakistan, we have become proactive. After the surgical strike, we have become preemptive and we have become proactive.
No, but in this case,
as far as this particular case of...
In this case, how do you become proactive? In this case, how do you become proactive?
Yeah, you have asked me a question. Let me please sum up. First and foremost, I echo the words of what Mr. Shashi Tharoor said. He had beautifully summed up the whole case. Thanks. Today the whole country is together, including the opposition. Number one, in this case, as to how India is proactive, remember, though Mr. Kulbhushan Jadhav was arrested on 3rd of March 2016, after a delay of 3 weeks, probably he was tortured then to have a confession made on 24th of March 2016, the so-called arrest, which Indian government denies, the so-called arrest was announced on 25th March 2016 itself. The very next day, the Indian government responds by first owning up that Mr. Kulbhushan Jadhav is a bona fide citizen of India and he was not arrested by Pakistan, but he was in fact kidnapped from the foreign nation, that is from Iran, from where he was brought to Pakistan. Right. And thirdly, the first consular access was sought the very next day when Pakistan declared that they have Kulbhushan Jadhav. From there till 31st of March 2017, 13 consular access were not just paper exchanged hands, but remember, Jai Shankar ji, our foreign secretary, as well as Mr. Gautam, the Indian ambassador in Pakistan, both of them played a very proactive role in conveying the message of the Indian government time and again to the Pakistani dispensation.
No, 1 minute. We are being proactive, no one denies that. But Mr. Tharoor, let's actually look at the nub of it. It is being proactive is one thing. What are the realistic diplomatic options? Can we, for example, appeal to Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and indeed the President of Pakistan to ask for clemency? Can we put international pressure? Can we try and take this case beyond Pakistan to an international forum? Is that possible, given the history whenever alleged spies have been caught, the kind of behavior we've seen from Islamabad and what you're hearing today?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, we will try, I'm sure, to do all of the above. Let me stress, sorry, Rajiv, this is my last response because I have another commitment to go to. But very simply, as far as speaking directly to the Prime Minister of Pakistan is concerned, I certainly hope we do that, and I hope that our message is clear and unambiguous. But we don't know the extent of his own authority in his country. This is not like the Prime Minister of India. You know, in India, the state has an army. In Pakistan, the army has a state, and the army seems to conduct its own policies as it sees fit, and I'm not sure to what degree they will take guidance from the official elected civilian prime minister. But nonetheless, we need to convey that message there. Secondly, we do need to go international. Let's not forget that there are a number of countries who have poured billions into the Pakistani military. The Pakistani military has grown fat and grown large on the strength of foreign assistance. Maybe those who are financing this military will be forced to be confronted by their rogue behavior and will perhaps have a moderating influence before they actually carry out the threat of this illegal execution.
In your experience, Dr. Tharoor, what works in a case like this? You worked with the United Nations. What works in a case like this? Is it international pressure? You're dealing with a country which has this inimical enmity. There are even reports that Pakistan is doing this as a tit-for-tat action because a lieutenant general apparently was abducted, they claim, who is linked to the ISI by the Indians along the Indo-Nepal border. Given these kind of responses, do you really see a way in which we can put pressure on Pakistan, Mr. Tharoor?
Well, if indeed we have abducted a senior ISI person, there seems to be the elements for a possible swap. That would be a very good solution as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, I don't know that that's true, and you know, frankly, we don't know how much to believe from the media. The truth is that even if Mr. Jadhav was the spy they claim he was, what you do with spies in these situations, especially when there is no declared war between your countries, but rather a kind of Cold War situation, is that eventually you exchange them. That's what the US and the Soviet Union did throughout the Cold War. So that's obviously the conclusion to which we must work, is to get the Pakistanis to rescind this death sentence, which we hope was done only for effect, to get our attention. Okay, now they've got our attention. Let's now talk about an exchange. If that is possible, then that would be the right way forward. Just as we exchange fishermen, just as we exchange prisoners, we can exchange spies as well, if indeed the people concerned on both sides happen to be spies. I don't really know that. But I just want to stress that if Pakistan goes ahead with this threat, there should be absolutely no doubt in my mind and in yours that the Indian government will take extraordinarily strong steps.
Like what?
We cannot let any state
What
do
can
this.
we do?
And I think we have to make
Should
it
we
clear
recall our
to
High Commissioner?
Pakistan. Well, I don't want to start spelling them out.
Should we recall our High Commissioner? What are the steps for an individual?
That's certainly something we can talk about publicly.
Okay,
If they
see where you're going.
Jadhav, then certainly we should recall our High Commissioners. And what is more, but that's not the only thing I would do. There'll be some things I'd rather not talk about in a public forum, but I certainly think that all options should be on the table as far as India is concerned. But at the very minimum, certainly calling back our High Commissioner and saying, we cannot talk to you as a normal state because you're not a normal state. You've behaved like an outlaw state. That should be the message.
Okay, let me go to Sambit Patra. Sambit Patra, you're hearing from the Pakistanis, the general tone has been that they seem to be unmindful of the consequences that could be affected. Will that change India's perspective? Will we recall our High Commissioner as Mr. Tharoor seems to be suggesting?
See, as far as spelling as to what India can do, the options in fact are on the table, but what the options can be are best left to the ministry concerned rather than the spokespersons coming and articulating them on the television. This is not the right way in diplomacy, and I would not transgress into a zone which is not mine.
Let me therefore come to Raji. I appreciate the fact, I appreciate what you're saying, but Rajiv Dogra, a former Indian envoy to Pakistan, he's been Consul General there, joins me. Mr. Dogra, do you believe recalling the High Commissioner is the very minimum as a first step that we must take to convey our extreme, not just displeasure, but anger in the manner in which this Kulbhushan Jadhav case has been handled by the Pakistani military court?
Well, I am not ruling out that, as Sambit has said and as Shashi Tharoor said before that, but to what effect? You recall a High Commissioner or you take a particular step in the hope that it will make the other state give up its aberrant behavior. Is it going to do that? I don't think so. Secondly, we have not discussed the dimensions of the problem. Let me take 1 minute or 2 minutes to sketch out the dimension of the issue. Number one, Jadhav is not the only one where Pakistan's behavior has been aberrant. There's a young boy of 23-year age called Hamid Ansari who has been tried in a military court for no fault of his, and no one accuses him of being a spy, and he has completed his sentence and more than that, and he has not been given consular access. The other thing is that 2 clerics from Nizamuddin Dargah had gone to Pakistan to visit their elder sister who was 90 years old, and these people were 80 plus years old themselves. They were kidnapped. Are they also Indian spies? What kind of treatment they got, no one knows. Jadhav was not operating in Pakistan. According to the German ambassador of that time, he was kidnapped from Iran. So what is he being held for? The other thing is, why are we assuming that he is an Indian national on the basis of a photograph? The man may be entirely different from the photograph shown on television or the so-called drug state that he was interviewed in on camera. So I think we are making a lot of fundamental mistakes by not taking into account Pakistani intentions and Pakistani game plan. We are just reacting to a situation in terms of seeking answers which are not there.
I'm running out of time, and I want to ask you therefore, Mr. Patra, given the fact that this fits in with a pattern, there is a clear pattern that is emerging that the Pakistani state at the moment is either turning rogue or is simply entering a phase where they are unmindful of international opinion. And the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, seems to have limited elbow room of putting any pressure on the army. Given that, do you see Prime Minister Narendra Modi picking up the phone and at least speaking to Nawaz Sharif and conveying his displeasure and saying, sir, enough is enough, Mr. Sharif? The Prime Minister claims to have had a personal equation with Mr. Sharif. This is the moment to cash in.
See, I cannot preempt as to what the Prime Minister does. Naturally, as far as the diplomatic escalation, as far as the diplomatic talk is concerned, it has its own steps and it moves in a step forwardly manner. So all the steps would be taken into account in solving this case. And I should also reiterate the words used by Sushma Swaraj that we caution Pakistan. मैं सावधान करती हूँ, we caution Pakistan that if they do what they have said, then the consequences would be quite high. They have to face the consequences. So naturally, everything must have been factored in when these strong words were used by the Indian government. And all I can say is Pakistan has yet again exposed itself in this particular case, because the loopholes that are lying in front of us, anyone who goes through the whole issue can tell that this is a case which declares nothing but judicial terrorism in part of Pakistan.
Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. Clearly, we are dealing with an unfortunate situation at the moment caused by a hostile neighbor that seems determined to up the ante. I appreciate my guest joining me. The Kulbhushan Jadhav case, where do we stand? The Kulbhushan Jadhav case is typical of the Pakistani state, opaque, now non-accountable and frankly rogue. If Jadhav is a terrorist, then the evidence must be made public. Else a kangaroo military court surely cannot decide the fate of an Indian national. Jadhav deserves a fair trial. Pakistan must show that it is committed to justice. If it doesn't, India must take the next step, recall its High Commissioner. Engage Islamabad first, but be also prepared to isolate it. Let me take a break. When we return, our next big story, a day after stripping outside the Prime Minister's office, Tamil Nadu's farmers continue their dramatic protest by eating food directly off the street. Our